Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond. We are being joined by experts in female physiology, nutrition, training, recovery, and talking about the full gamut of what it means to be an athlete and how do we be athlete, how do we exercise, how do we keep going, how do we keep going well long into our life. And today we are joined by Claire Callaghan. So welcome, Claire. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me.
I'm going to just give everybody who's listening and watching a little bit more information about you. I am truly excited to learn in this interview. And the reason being is because Claire is a chartered physiotherapist who specializes in women's physical health, well-being, and in performance. She's been doing physiotherapy for over 25 years and has a master's in sport and exercise physiotherapy. And basically, she has been working like the full gamut of, quote unquote, athlete, people who exercise, people who don't exercise that are trying to exercise. And she's also worked with female Olympic gold medalists and finalists in across all sports. So what she really is about is helping people and women and coaches of women, everybody, learn and understand more about their bodies. What are the hormonal effects on injuries and repair? And so how do we get to be our best and achieve our goals? And so this is, I was just mentioning to Claire, what a unique expertise she has in the world of athletics and sport, because what we get to talk about today is looking at the effects of estrogen, our hormones, on muscles, tendons, joints, soft tissue, connective tissue, balance. And I'm so excited that you're here and ready to dig into this with us. So thank you.
No worries at all.
Oh, it's brilliant. So let's just go. Is there anything else that you wanted our listeners to know about you that I missed? No.
I think that's it. They can probably tell I'm Australian from my accent, but I live in Britain. But that's it, really.
Awesome.
That's about
awesome. It. Well, we'll get to know you more as we go through the conversation. Sure. So can you just start from the basics and understanding the hormonal effects on some of our soft tissues, and what does that look like? What do you want us to know? Maybe even share a little bit about how you came to an understanding where the science is at, because that's one of the push and the pull that we also have in this field.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay, so let's think about our hormones and menopause specifically as a whole. So if you're thinking about women as they go through their teenage and childbearing years, their estrogen levels are high, mm-hmm. And they have this fluctuating levels of other hormones in their bodies. So this estrogen in particular is particularly important for our soft tissues and the quality of them. So if we think about the quality of our muscle tissue and the quality of our tendons, where the muscle attaches to the bones, and the quality of ligaments and that nice tensile strength that you get in the collagen that is, such an important fundamental building block of our tendons and our ligaments, there's estrogen receptors within some of these tissues, you see. And that has a number of benefits, because it means that if there's any injury, it appears that the estrogen has a positive benefit on that. And similarly, as many people will already know, estrogen is an important part of bone turnover as well. So it helps us build up good strength in our bone and maintain that strength. And of course, bone and muscle strength are interdependent as well, because the stronger the muscle is, then you're going to get better pull on the bone. Right. So it all ties in together. And, during those childbearing years, estrogen levels are good. And unfortunately, then what happens to women, of course, is you get towards perimenopause and the estrogen levels drop and kind of come off the cliff. So it's then, well, what happens to our soft tissues then? Interestingly, and sadly, I think there's not enough research in this area. So it's really difficult for us to say exactly what happens postmenopausally, although I'm pleased to say that there is a lot of ongoing research that's starting to emerge and starting to come through. But we certainly know with our bones that there's, in the first 5 to 7 years post-menopause, if there's no increase in weight-bearing exercise, if there's no hormone replacement as such, and I'm not going to advocate for or against that, that's another conversation. But, in those first 5 to 7 years, if there's no change in that hormonal status and the estrogen drops, then we can lose up to 20% of our bone mass, which is obviously pretty huge. And that then has the effect on the connective tissue surrounding it and the leverage that we have in our muscles as well. Now, fortunately, most women who are going to be on this conversation are going to be doing weight-bearing exercise. They're going to be doing resistance work. They're going to be strong. But that said, even with these drops in estrogen, even when you are fit and active and so on, the issue then becomes about the quality. It seems that the quality of the tendons and the quality of the ligaments is reduced. So that nice springiness yet toughness that you'll normally get in a tendon or a ligament, it all just becomes a bit stiffer, a bit thicker. It's not so pliable. So, for example, if we were to use something like the big Achilles tendon in the back of the ankle as an example, if you're walking or running, you've got that nice springiness that comes back up, that elastic recoil in the tendon. And it appears that as both the combination of getting older and the changing levels of hormones result in that nice springiness not being there so much. Mm-hmm. And therefore, when it's a bit thicker and tighter, we're more susceptible to injury potentially. And again, this is a bit of a gray area. We don't exactly know how the mechanisms all work, mm-hmm. but it does seem that that's the tendency, and that repairing takes longer. And I know we might talk a bit later about which specific parts of the body that affects, but that is in a nutshell what happens to some of our ligaments and our tendons. And muscle power reduces. It's been noted in a number of studies, but again, it seems that it's the quality of the muscle rather than just its strength that seems to be the issue, that may be related to estrogen as well. Yeah.
Can you help us understand a little bit more what you mean by quality and of muscle as opposed to strength? So we have been, learning, and we'll learn throughout this series about the importance of strength training because it's being so strongly advocated by every practitioner that is talking to us. So that's brilliant. But I want to know a little bit more about what that means specifically.
Sure. So if we're talking about quality of connective tissue without getting too scientific, so I'm going to use the skin as an example because that's something we can all see on the outside, isn't it? Yeah. So if you think about the skin of somebody who is in their 20s or 30s, it's nice and vibrant and there's a lot of nice elasticity to it. The collagen is giving it, it's a bit like scaffolding collagen. It gives it the structure and the nice sort of tensile qualities that it has. So the quality, if you can imagine the quality of skin, and then think about that on the inside. So again, your muscles are a bit like a piece of material knitting, coming together. There's all these fibers that come together. Mm-hmm. So if you can imagine the quality of that material being nice and elasticized, but still really vibrant and strong,
right?
That's what your muscles like when you're younger. Now, obviously, age has an effect on this as well, mm-hmm. but it appears that nice springiness, that when I talk about the quality, that's really what we're talking about. And that's important not only for injury, but also, for example, if your foot's hitting the ground and you're thinking about how are my tendons and my ligaments absorbing that force, if it's not nice and springy, it's not going to be able to transfer that force quite as well. And it's just going to feel like harder work because you're not getting that rebounding energy, coming through the system. So, yeah.
Is it, and then to kind of manage it, is it kind of like a use it or lose it? Or like, I know it's, so estrogen is decreasing. So we know the quality, as you're saying, is going down. But we know strength training is important, but how do is there anything else that we do to help prevent the injury, the risk? Is it progressive? Is it, keep doing fast stuff, or to tell us a little bit more about your thoughts there?
Sure. Okay, so there's a lot of different components really to that. Absolutely, use it or lose it. And that goes not just for the muscle strength tissues. So I'm just aware of the light here. I'm just going to move across because the light is changing here. I may need to adjust something in a minute. So yeah, in terms of use it or lose it, absolutely, that's key. But also, if we're thinking about your muscles and how they work, there's been studies done that have looked at rather large, nearly 1,000 peri and postmenopausal women, and compared to them to premenopausal women, and looked at how what's their jump height, for example, how high can they jump, and how quickly can they create power. So how quickly can they generate power from their muscles? And what they found was that women who had, for example, been really active before, even though everyone who was postmenopausal dropped a bit in this ability to jump high and generate power, the ones who were more active before and remained more active peri and postmenopause were not only stronger, but they were still able to jump higher and have more power than those who were more sedentary. So it seems that, yes, there is a use it or lose it, but it's not just about resisted training, which is clearly important. It's also about doing things which are challenging your balance and challenging your nervous system, your coordination. So, for example, if you were doing a running sport, for example,
right,
not only would you have to practice the running and all the running strength, but you also need to practice the balance stuff, and maybe even doing an aerobics class or something that's going to make your brain work in a different way, so that you're keeping up all those nervous system connections as well.
Trail running.
Trail running, yeah, well,
right,
exactly,
like
yeah,
jumping over rocks and side to side movements and trying to get some of
Perfect.
that dynamic movement into. So really changing up the type of surface, and we can still do it doing the things we love, but we do have to think
Absolutely.
about how are our feet moving differently, how are our joints having to respond to the demand.
Absolutely. Tennille, I'm just going to pull my curtain because it's like shining a bright light on my face. I won't be 2 seconds.
Yes. And I will just keep talking here for a second because this is super interesting, and I want the listeners to know that we have this ability to we have to think about what it is that we're taking on early, right? So one of the challenges that we have in this space is, when do we start really becoming active? I mean, we should say we always want to be thinking about our health and thinking about, being active and yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to thinking about our health and as we approach, so as early as 35, like we really need to be thinking about how are we going to hit these perimenopausal years as our estrogen decreases and we start to experience symptoms. And how do we get beyond that? Because what we do now, 35, like what we do in our 20s matters for our 30s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we really want to, can you talk a little bit about that importance, just a little bit more in terms of the strength of our muscles and our bones? And we, I guess I wanted to say one more thing or ask a question is, like, we know that in terms of our bone health, it kind of just starts to deteriorate after a certain point. But there's still value in that and understanding, okay, well, how do we start protecting from 35 to 45 to 55 to 65?
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, if you're thinking about the lifespan, of course, we know that you're building up your strength through the teenage years, and you're hitting your skeletal maturity sort of in your late teens, really.
Yeah.
And then your bone mass will continue, and that nice solidifying of the bone, the strengthening of the bone will continue up until about the age of, your late 20s, your bone mass will peak.
Right.
And then sadly, it starts to drop. Okay. So when you're in those early to mid 30s, absolutely, you want to be maintaining this peak bone mass for as high as you can for as long as you can. So that is doing the weight bearing exercise and doing resisted work, with, whether that's using body weight as a resistance or muscle, strength work in the gym,
right,
or sport. But that said, you also want to be thinking about, and this is poorly researched at the moment, but hopefully it's going to start emerging a bit more. There's starting to be, in terms of guidance that's given to UK adults, and I can speak about the UK obviously because we're here, and I think you can translate it to other Western countries.
Mm-hmm.
It's recommended that we do twice a week balance work. Okay. So that's only in relatively recent guidelines.
Wow.
They've come out in the end of 2019, in September 2019, that we should all be doing balance work twice a week. Because people have put two and two together and thought, well, as women particularly get older, I mean, it happens to men too, but as women get older, they're more at risk of falls, and they're more balance will reduce. And so therefore we need to prepare for that throughout our whole adult life. So certainly strength training and doing some strengthening, certainly balance work. I would say as well, it's an age where a lot of women will be getting pregnant, having kids, and equally, your pelvic floor is clearly an important part of your overall strength. So for example, I'll just get my little model actually, because I find that models explain things better than I can. But if you've got here, so here's your little pelvic floor model, okay? Like that. So here's your little sling of your pelvic floor in there. So you do need to think about strengthening that at that age, not just while you're pregnant, but whilst it's still got that connective tissue strength and tensile strength, because 9 months of having a baby, potentially pressing down on that and then passing through that area is clearly going to have an effect on that. But equally, how strong you are here, look what it's close to. It's close to your lower back. It's close to your hips. It's going to be transmitting force from the upper part of the body to the lower part of the body. So I think it's a bit of a missing link that sometimes we just don't think about. And women's pelvic floors go through a fair bit in some cases. So we, again, I would say in your 30s, that's the time to start, and 40s, that's the time to start thinking about strengthening the pelvic floor if you haven't already. And there's lots of good information, which, you could talk for hours about, but
yeah. Well, we are going to also have another speaker that speaks specifically to the pelvic floor, which is she'll get right into it. But I really appreciate the point that it's connected to your, like, it is a base. It's it's your sling, as you say. Can you go into a couple more of the specific challenges that you're noticing? You've already mentioned a little bit of the Achilles tendinopathy, but there was a couple more that you also have mentioned in your articles.
Yes.
Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So what I'm finding clinically, and this is being reflected in the research, is that specific tendon problems seem to peak for women in their 40s and 50s. So you'd have to be thinking, okay, there could be a significant hormonal element here. And the researchers are starting to pick up on this and putting that forward as a theory. It doesn't seem to be as simple as drop in estrogen, you get a tendon problem. However, it seems that the drop in estrogen means you're not getting that repair process kicking in as well, and maybe the strength in those tendons isn't as good. So if we use gluteal tendinopathy as the prime example, it's estimated that 1 in 4 women, close to 1 in 4 women who are in their 40s and 50s may suffer from this condition. So it's pretty common. Okay. Yeah. And also, if you're looking at that a little bit further, so we're talking about pain really on this part of the hip, or a little bit behind, or a little bit in front, but basically this part of the hip. Okay. Yeah. Now, again, it might be to do with hormonal change. You'd have to be thinking that that's a distinct possibility. It used to be thought of as an inflammatory problem, but now it seems more of a problem where the tendon's just not repairing properly. Okay. So you can get a breakdown in some of those connective tissues, and you're just not getting that repair process happening. We're noticing similar things, and I see it really commonly in the Achilles tendon, the big thick tendon at the back of the heel. Also your tibialis posterior tendon, which is sort of runs down the inside of your heel. So if you think about those big bony bits on each side of the lower part of your near the ankle.
Mhm.
Underneath there's a big tendon that goes underneath there and inserts underneath the foot, the tibialis posterior. And again, it seems that the thinning of that tendon may be happening, and it seems to be more common in women, and it seems to happen around the same time as perimenopause. So you don't want to sort of assume it's all connected, but there could be factors. And that combined with the slight widening of the feet that can happen as we get older, it seems that it could be the perfect storm for some people to be getting the recurrent injuries in some of those tendons. And some of the answers may lie in the change in hormones and addressing that and continuing really specific strength work. So it seems that weight bearing strengthening is the way forward with all of those conditions, really.
Right.
So great to just do a bit of strengthening on your side, but actually it's the work you do standing up and that really makes a difference.
Okay, so let's go there. So specifically, balance work you've mentioned, weight bearing exercise, dynamic movement as you do strength work. So we talked about trail running because it creates that differentiation. Anything else that you would recommend, top tips for us to think about, like the widening of the feet? Should be working on feet, or like?
So I've just written like a little infographic for a menopause charity over here, exactly this, like top tips around it. So we know about the things that you've mentioned. I would say as well, hopping or jumping, because it's just something we don't do as much as we get older. So specific hopping, jumping, skipping, if people can tolerate it, that can be useful as long as you're, not so injured that kind of impact is making it worse.
Right.
I would say the more dynamic, the better. And, I love things like yoga and Pilates. I'm always referring to people to them, but it's important to remember that they're not going to give you that dynamic jump ability, or that a lot of people who are trying to create power when they're doing athletics might want. So, for example, if you're a hockey player, you need to be able to change direction quickly. You need to be able to run in multiple different directions. If you're a triathlete, you need to be good in a number of different circumstances. You need to be able to sort of maneuver yourself quite quickly, and your balance needs to be tip top, isn't it? So basically, I would say something where you're jumping, hopping, changing direction, drills that do that for you are really, really important. And maybe even think about cross training as well, because a lot of sports are the same movement over and over and over again. Mixing it up a little bit as we get older stops just those same forces going through the same joints all the time.
Right.
And getting your setup on things like your bike, for example, just right, because like things like, we change as we get older. Getting the footwear right, that's key. Having a nice firm heel counter, not just when you're out running, but when you're in the gym as well. That's really important.
So great to hear that. There's another Julie Young will speak about that in terms of bike fitting and the importance of that. And it's so cool how there's the research between the modalities is coming together as well. It's be like, okay, we are seeing this here and we're applying it there. And there seems to be a real shift in reaching out in all of that. Well, okay. I want to, are we missing anything that really you wanted to make sure that women are aware of in perimenopause and menopause before I get to my rapid fire questions?
Not really. The only thing I would obviously say is, physical activity is one bit of the puzzle in terms of any injury repair. But one area that there is getting a lot of exposure through research is the area of sleep and the role of rest and repair. And again, I don't know if any other speakers are speaking about that, but I see so often, and I don't want to highlight it as a women's issue, but I think that women kind of put themselves last a lot of the time, and are so busy with so many things, and they're trying to get better. They're going to the gym to get stronger, or they're doing all these other things, but having that 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night and really nourishing yourself and fitting it, planning the post-run food or the post-exercise food, it just makes such a difference over over the course of getting from being injured to, being back out there doing what you want to do in performance. And I just see that time and again. And that's the only thing I'd say is, yes, obviously what physios do is great in terms of helping people get better, but it's the whole picture, which is why what you're doing is great, because you're bringing the whole picture together. So
yeah, no, I really appreciate that you say that, because we so often just want to do, like,
it's
but
in our
doing
nature.
now needs to mean stopping, right?
Yeah.
And rejigging our brains that recovery is actually the next element of your sport, and it's actually critical, not a next, it's actually essential to your sport. And if you don't do it, you're doing yourself a disservice in performance. So no, I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to get into the rapid fire questions before we find out how to find you. All right, give us one moment of courage.
Wow. Okay, so so in my past life, I worked for Bristol University for many years, and I was fortunate enough to be the manager of their sports medicine clinic there. And when I stepped into that role, we were looking after a large number of students and staff, but also some quite elite athletes that went on to do some incredible things. But they came from such a wide variety of sports, and some of these sports I hadn't played. Okay. So I've played a lot of sport, done a lot of different things, but things like ultimate frisbee and korfball, they were not really things that I knew that much about. So to get asked to do that role and be part of a management team where I was one of only 2 females in a group of about 11 or 12, and there's 11 or 12 guys, and having to speak up and advocate, and be the one who took on the women's issues, of which there were quite a few. Like there were a few moments of, oh my gosh, I've not done that sport, I don't know. So having that self-belief of, yeah, but I've got the fundamentals and I can adapt my knowledge. And it's actually a really good opportunity to talk about, how we can help young females, particularly in the university environment, be more active, or organize maybe women's only gym sessions, or all those fun things. So that was my moment of courage, just having the self-belief and not being daunted, I guess.
Stepping in and stepping up. Totally. No, I love that. And I love it where it's taken you, because obviously now you've been working for some time specifically in women's health, and isn't it just so perfect how our life unfolds sometimes, and you seize that opportunity, and it took a lot to go and step in. So that's awesome. I love it. Thank you. All right, next question. You ready? What are you grateful for right now?
Oh gosh, right now I think well, I've had my first COVID vaccine, so I'm quite grateful for that.
Oh, congratulations! That's so exciting.
So and I don't know where things are at around the rest of the world, but I think it's highly variable. So I'm very grateful for that, and I am grateful for my health, my family's health in such a difficult time, and that I can still keep working. And we've all had to change what we're doing, but that we can still find a way of sharing knowledge, and probably meeting up with people like you that we might not have otherwise had the nerve to do the tech with, really. Actually, I'm grateful for that right now.
Oh, thank you. No, I hear you on all those levels. I haven't got my vaccine, but I'm excited about being grateful about getting it. All right. And
it'll come, I'm sure.
I am certain of it. Yes, it will. What is one piece of advice that you would give to yourself, or you'll have to give to yourself again and again, as you approaching perimenopause, in perimenopause, beyond menopause? What do you tell yourself?
Well, I would think it's important to sort of still prioritize yourself a little bit, because I think that it's so easy to get pulled in a million different directions, and there's always going to be other things you could be doing. But I think for me in particular, health is a priority. Clearly, it's part of my profession, but even then, it's still difficult sometimes to prioritize your own personal health. And I think women, and again, I've looked into this across studies and stuff, and women don't tend to prioritize their own health. and prioritizing time out for yourself, and that's okay. You know, it kind of fits into that resting and relaxing bit. I struggle with it, but I guess you need to enlist the help of others a little bit as well for that sometimes. So I think prioritizing yourself and your health and a little bit of time for yourself, if and however you can, I think is just an important reminder ongoing, really.
Yeah.
So,
And I love it that you said that sometimes we need a little help with it.
yeah, you can't do it on your own.
No, I agree. I have my best friend, you know, calling me up and being like, okay, did you get your strength training done this week, Tennille? Because I love to shut it off because I would rather go for a run or a ride, but no, I know better. So no, I appreciate that too. All right. So you have provided all the listeners here with, amazingly, a discount code for your courses. And so can you just tell us a little bit more about what courses they are, and
Sure.
where we can find you and find that?
Lovely. So I'm doing quite a few different courses, all for women, all around health, well-being, and sporting performance. And I do some of them on my own, but I do tend to work with others on these. For example, nutritionists, dietitians, sports psychologists, and their online courses. They range from being an hour and a half, you know, short little sessions that are sort of bite-sized bits of information, all the way through to like 4 or 5 weekly blocks at the same time each week. And some of them are aimed at particular sports. So, for example, I work a lot in running. Some of them are aimed at runners, but others are aimed more at a wider audience. So I'm doing one coming up soon on eating and strengthening for an active lifestyle. And clearly that's with a dietitian and nutritionist, and I do the strength bit. So it's those kind of courses. Yeah. And so the discount code would be, you know, for the ones that we run this year.
Perfect. Oh, well, thank you so very much. We will make sure that we link to your all your social media handles and your website. And your physiotherapy what is the name of your clinic itself?
Oh, it's just my name, Claire Callaghan. So yeah, so I've tried to keep it simple.
So that's where we can find you. Awesome.
Yeah, just and my handle's Physio Claire Cal. So it's so hopefully it all fits. It's all easy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I look so much forward to more conversations on this and getting the information out to women on, you know, in all sports. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Oh, you too. Cheers, Tennille. Bye-bye.